DP.
Listen to Stacy on the Right with Stacy Washington on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp.
I mean, did you hear that?
Pointed.
Remember that you're not only a Christian on Sunday.
And insightful.
Deception and lies have been accepted as the norm from the Democrats.
But most of all, she's on the right.
That scripture from the Bible, it says the heart of the fool inclines to the left, just kept popping into my mind.
Stacy on the Right. Now heard weekday afternoons from 2 to 4 Central on Urban Family Talk. Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
Love is everlasting, love is only kind, love is always patient, love will blow your mind.
But Grammys ratings were down 24%, and I don't, the Grammys. I don't really watch award shows anymore, and maybe I know there's a segment of the population that thinks Trump jokes are hilarious, making fun of Republicans is hilarious. I'm here to tell you that Hillary Clinton cameos, all that, I'm so turned off. I have no interest in being lectured to about my friends who are Trump supporters, and if Hollywood wants to be more inclusive as they claim they are, they're all inclusive except when it comes to conservative values, and except when it comes to Republicans, and I'm not interested in watching that.
Wait a second. Hold on a second.
Yes. Meghan McCain finding her voice on The View. Welcome to Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk and American Family Radio. 866-963-2037. Call lines are wide open for you. And we have a jam-packed show. In fact, today is one of my bucket list days because I get to interview two of my favorite people, two people that I hope to. One I've met, one I hope to meet in the near future. Both women who are strong and do amazing work on behalf of conservatism and the Second Amendment in one case, and nonprofit activism in the other. So who am I talking about? Who do we have on the show today? Well, first hour, we're going to speak with Stacy Bright, NRA Firearms Instructor, radio host, writer. She's with the Well-Armed Women, and Well-Armed Woman, and she actually is working out of Missouri. She organizes the chapters for the Well-Armed Woman here in Missouri. And what's so fun about that is that I got to meet Barbara Baird, who is, I think, one of the creators of the Well-Armed Woman, and so much fun. And when I say fun, I'm talking about firearms fun, where you're learning, you're shooting, you're getting all of the information that you need. And so this is just kind of an introduction. We're going to be speaking with her today from the Missouri Capitol, where they were honored this morning. And I wasn't able to attend the event, but I'm so excited to get to speak to her about it and hear firsthand what's going on there at the Missouri Capitol. And then in hour two, we're going to speak to the Kay Cole James. She is Dr. Kay Cole James, the president of the Heritage Foundation. She's the new president of the Heritage Foundation. And so it's an honor to get to interview her now and speak with her about what the Heritage Foundation is doing and some other things that we have on the docket for the show today. So what do we hear coming in at the top of the hour? Well, you heard Meghan McCain talking about the Oscars. We didn't talk about the Oscars much yesterday, but I do want to get into a comment that was made by the rapper Common. Perhaps you've heard of him. Common said that we NRA members and gun owners are in the way of God. Now, you guys know me. I don't take kindly to people who just toss God's name around. I don't take kindly to it. And so I don't want to be sanctimonious or act like I'm perfect or anything of that nature, but we got to go ahead and admit that there are some systemic problems with the music industry and how they portray women, specifically Black women. We've got to go into a sense of introspection on how no other group of women in America is allowed to be spoken of and sung about and represented in music videos and on television the way Black women are permitted to be shamed and vilified. And this is a part of the American culture and the landscape, the cultural landscape, that continues to be a problem because it's permitted. So if it were a situation where everyone was against it and people were moving to make it illegal or to make it taboo, it would be one thing. But it's not just accepted. It's just the way it is. And so when you're approached by people, when you encounter people, I found this a lot, especially when our kids were really small. They would see 3 small kids and just assume that I was a single welfare mom. It didn't matter where I was, how I was dressed, what the kids were doing. We could be at the library at a reading group. And when other moms, you go around and introduce yourselves, they would automatically say something to the effect of, well, you're a strong Black woman. It must be so tough with 3 kids. And I'm thinking, well, I'm here at the library in the middle of the day with 3 small kids. Do you really think I'm on public assistance? But that is what people thought. It doesn't matter how well you speak, what kind of hair you're sporting. Don't think it's the natural locks. I did not have these when my kids were small. There is no reason for everyone in America to have the idea that if you encounter a Black woman, she's automatically on welfare. It doesn't matter where she is. You can be out in West County in the mall, walking during the day, kids in a stroller, kids have snacks. You're walking, people assume you're on welfare if you're Black. That's not because all Black women are on welfare. That's because the images and the messages that are portrayed about Black women follow the model that Common has helped to perpetrate. Now, I know he has some thought-provoking raps, and he has some raps that are love songs and things like that. And I know that he considers himself to be an activist, and he runs some not-for-profits in inner cities. And so he does some of the good work that needs to be done to improve the lives of others. But when it comes to credibility on social issues, morals, and gun ownership, for instance, or Christianity specifically, this guy has where exactly does his credibility come from? He's someone who assists in the degradation of America's Black women, and by extension, women in general. Because what most people don't understand about Black culture and what goes on in inner cities is that the inner cities are a microcosm of what happens in the suburbs. You just take it out 10, 15, 20 years. So if you see rampant family degradation, families breaking down in inner cities in the 70s, 80s, now you see it in the larger population. The out-of-wedlock birth rate is 40% nationwide. So this is a problem that impacts all communities, white communities included. But where did it start? In the Black community. So whatever we see happening in the inner cities, you see that creeping out. The whole pants sagging down, the prison chic that left the prisons, made it into the Black community. Now you walk out in the suburbs and you see young white kids, 13 years old, with their pants hanging down by their ankles with a little, they'll have a fancy belt wrapped around there, but it's not pulled tight enough to keep their pants up. So if we want to see the respect for women improve in this country, we have to say it has to stop where it started. We have to stop allowing this kind of music to be what's piped into the ears of our kids through their earbuds. Any child who's listening to popular music, specifically the rap variety, the hip hop variety, what of that is left, is getting a message that it's okay to talk not just down to women, but to actually psychologically damage them with the most hate-filled and debased and low degrading words. That's what they're learning in that music. They're also learning that women are tools for sex and for anything else that you might be able to use a woman for, but it's not a human being, an entity with a soul and a spirit that needs to be protected and respected. That's not what this music teaches these kids. And so when we look at all of the different signs that our culture is not just grading down a little bit or experiencing some shifts, but it's literally like a dumpster fire, stinking to high heaven and burning with the fire of Hades, you have to know it starts with the culture and what we permit there. And so I'm one of those people who I like my music from the 80s and the 90s, and I love all of the different genres from back then, growing up listening to all kinds of music instead of just one. Well, you're Black, you only listen to hip hop. That's not the way I grew up. I listened to a lot of different kinds of music. But if you have listened to music over the years, you notice that certain genres of music are all about having sex. Other genres of music are about romance and love and some sex. It's all got some sex in it. But there's a difference in the way that rappers, and we're talking about Beyonce's husband, Jay-Z. What does he call women? He doesn't call them women, queens, beings of beauty, any of the superlatives you can think of to call a woman. He doesn't call them that. He calls them the worst possible names. And those are the names that get piped into the ears of the young people, and they call each other that in their everyday interactions. We've even seen with the Kardashians, who are exemplary of popular culture, they refer to each other as the name for a female dog on the regular, and it's not in anger. It's just another term of endearment, if you will. The way that hip hop and rap has claimed to take back the N-word, but in reality, all they're doing is normalizing it and making it so that everyone gets to feel the sting instead of removing it from our normal nomenclature and making it something that when you hear it, it's so shocking, so disgusting, so out of the norm that it becomes, an instant vilification, an instant, that person uses the kind of language that's only heard in the very worst parts of our society. But instead, the language of the very worst parts of our society, poverty, degradation, everything bad, all of that language has been elevated so that now everybody's dropping the F-bomb. Little kids are doing it on YouTube and the parents are laughing. Grown-ups are doing it. People speak the F-bomb to each other in common, conversation. It's just another way of expressing that something's really bad or really cool. And so a part of this whole problem, Common, he says that the National Rifle Association, and this is at the Oscars, he says NRA members and the NRA, I'm quoting him, they in God's way. Now, first of all, obviously, as a grammar Nazi, I own it. The man can't even fix his mouth to insult National Rifle Association members with proper English. They in God's way. So let's not address the grammar any further than that. We just noted it. He says the situation is they're on the Oscars. He's performing there with singer Andra Day. They're performing their duet Stand Up for Something, which was nominated for Best Original Song for the 2017 film Marshall. I don't know what it's about because I didn't see it. On Oscar night, this is the dream we tell, a land where dreamers live and freedom dwells, Common rapped in his opening verse, customized for the awards ceremony. He says, immigrants get the benefits. We put up the monuments for the feminists. Now, remember, as a part of rap, things need to rhyme. And so that often has resulted in there being a line or two in rap songs where you're sitting there like, what? What did he just say? And you just rap along for the benefit because you love the beat. This is an example of that. He's just making sentences to ensure that the ends of the sentences rhyme so that the beat can flow and he can move through the performance. So tell the NRA they in God's way. And to the people of Parkland, we say ASE, ASC, he continued, using the West African term for the ability to produce change and make things happen. Sentiments of love for the people from Africa, Haiti to Puerto Rico. Common is a critic of President Trump, which is his right. Common is someone who hails from the left. He's on the left. But I think what we're losing here is that Common is trying to present himself as some form of he thinks he's a cultural pillar. He's someone that people should look up to in his own mind. And what he doesn't realize is that moms and dads across this country, when they think of what they want their children to aspire to, Common is not it. I have never once in my years of being a mother and thousands of people that I've talked to on a professional basis and in private settings, in public settings, in meetings, in groups, in town halls, you name it, as a school board member, as a school board vice president, as a secretary of our school board, in every instance, when people talk about the individuals that they lift up as an example for their children to emulate, I never once have heard a parent of any ethnic background say a rapper is the person they want their kids to be, or a rapper is someone that's setting the example for their kids. They rarely name off football players or basketball players or anyone in entertainment. They usually talk about academics. people who've made a difference in the lives of others, pastors, preachers, ministers, nurses, doctors, lawyers, judges, people of faith, community members, almost anybody but somebody like Common, a man who can't even formulate his insults in the Queen's English. So you know what, Common? I'm not in the way of God. I'm following God, and I invite you to do the same. And then perhaps children across America could look up to you. But first, you have to pick yourself up out of the gutter, speak English, and stop defaming others who believe differently than you. That would put you on the very first rung to being someone we could look at, let alone look up to. We'll be back with our first guest, Stacy Bright, right after these messages. Stay there.
American Family Radio and Preborn are partnering to help save babies' lives throughout America.
Well, my name is Dan Steiner, and I'm the president of Preborn. Ultrasound truly is a game changer. When a mom comes into a pregnancy center under pressure to abort her child, perhaps the dad's gone, perhaps her mother is pressuring her. Most of the time in her heart she doesn't want to abort, but what she needs is something that will give her the strength to choose life against the pressures forcing her to consider abortion. That's the ultrasound. If she hears her baby's heartbeat and sees that baby on ultrasound, 80% of the time she'll choose life.
Be a compassionate answer to abortion and help save a baby's life. Go to preborn.com now. That's preborn.com. Or dial pound 250 and say keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. All gifts are tax deductible. Your love can save a life.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a Legacy Moment. I have a lot of friends, but I'm especially thankful for a handful of close friends who ask me hard questions. When we see each other, we look each other straight in the eye and ask, "Are you clean?" Now, I know that sounds kind of like a hard, direct question, but we know each other and we love each other. We do this out of love and a sincere desire to encourage each other to finish well. We all need to be reminded to remain faithful. We need people in our lives who say, "How are you doing? Are you hanging in there? Are you staying faithful to your wife? Are you keeping your priorities? Are you using money wisely? What about your time?" We all need those people who help us lovingly keep going in the right direction. Great men and women of God have fallen. We must never forget the fact that we're vulnerable. In Joshua chapter 24, verses 14 and 15, it's Joshua's final message to the nation of Israel, where he's kind of preaching his own eulogy. Listen to what he says. "Now therefore fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and truth, and put away the gods in which your fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. And if it is disagreeable in your sight to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves today whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served, which were beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." Well, here's what I want you to remember today. If we're going to endure until the end, it will take a determined heart to please God, no matter what.
Crawford Loritz is Senior Pastor of Fellowship Bible Church in suburban Atlanta, Georgia. For more information, go to livingalegacy.org. Legacy Moment is a production of Moody Radio, a ministry of Moody Global Ministries.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program. Call lines are open at 866-963-2037, and it's my pleasure to be with you this afternoon. It's a great Tuesday, a great day to be alive, a great day to be an American, and a great day to be speaking with someone who is an expert, really an expert in firearms ownership and a leader in the women's movement for gun safety, gun knowledge, and being not just competent, but well-trained in firearms. Stacy Bright is an NRA Firearms Instructor, writer, and co-host. She's certified pistol and rifle instructor for the NRA. She's a Refuse to be a Victim instructor, Missouri Concealed Carry instructor, certified the Well-Armed Woman instructor, and leader of the Southwest Missouri chapter of the Well-Armed Woman. And she writes for Women's Outdoor News, range365.com. She's a social media manager. Girls, Guns, and Gear is her Twitter handle. And Girls and Guns gearreview.com is the website, as well as the wellarmedwoman.com and twawshootingchapters.org. Stacy, thanks for coming on today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so that was all a mouthful. Tell us, in your own words, what does all that mean? You're trained and certified to teach all of us cool stuff, but what does it mean?
Well, my main goal is just to train and educate people in the use of firearms, both to be safe and proficient with them, as well as to be able to protect themselves and others if they decide they want to carry a firearm concealed or on their person, or have one for home defense.
So talk about, like if you're just concealed carry certified, or if you're just someone who owns firearms and you want to go further in your training and start on the road to becoming an instructor, which is a leader. You're a leader once you become an instructor. What is the process like for someone? Like, how did you decide to do that?
Well, I decided that, I had been handling firearms, shooting quite a bit, and as I got more proficient and enjoyed it more, I started talking about it to my friends and, business associates and that kind of thing, and I found that especially women would come to me and ask me questions, and then, maybe they'd had an experience with another instructor or a spouse or somebody like that, but they just weren't communicating the same needs. They weren't getting it from the opposite gender. And so they would ask me if I would take them to the range, teach them a few things. And so as I was doing that, obviously I knew the gun safety rules and I could teach them only to my ability. I found that I really need to keep furthering my own ability so that I could do that. And so I went through the NRA instructor program, was certified both in pistol and rifle. You could also do that through the USCCA, the United States Concealed Carry Association. They have instructor programs as well. But it's really just equipping yourself. Obviously, you should always be learning. But just getting more and more knowledge to be able to teach others in a way that obviously they're safe. And then, they can keep taking other classes, whatever it might be, whatever they're choosing to do with that. As they progress through the process.
And then do you have to travel to take that training? Because I know some people will say, well, I'm interested in doing that, but maybe they don't want to travel outside of their state. And we're in 18 states for listeners, so not everyone is really, I guess, close to Dallas where the NRA is, or Washington, D.C. where they have their headquarters and all of that.
Right. There's NRA instructor programs all over the United States. If you go to NRA, I believe it's nrainstructors.org, or if you just Google NRA certification program, their website allows you to put in your state and then a certain distance that you're willing to travel, whether it's 30 miles or 100 miles, and it will find anybody in that location that's got their classes listed, and then where it's at, how much they charge for the program, because some instructors can choose to charge different amounts, that kind of thing. But they can really figure out where they want to go and what they want to do from there.
Okay, so and that's fantastic information. And I hope if you're feeling the little tug to get a little bit of extra training, or maybe just inquire about the instructor aspect of it, if you're a man or a woman, it really, I'm not in favor of one more than the other, then it's worth looking into and seeing where the training is, how many days it is, if it fits your schedule, and looking into it, because as you said, we should always be learning. So now I want to talk about why you're in the Capitol today. So you're down in Jeff City here in the state of Missouri, and I believe there was a group that was possibly honored for their work in the Second Amendment, possibly the Well-Armed Woman. Possibly you guys had a little bit of recognition today?
Yeah, we did. We across the state of Missouri, all members of the Well-Armed Women were invited to come to the the state capitol in Jefferson City for a TWAW, and that stands for the Well-Armed Woman Recognition Day. And this is the second year that we've been recognized on the House floor just for what we do in educating, equipping, and empowering women.
I love that. So I hoped to come with you, but with a teenager graduating and one going to college. So graduating and going to college, and then the other one is a junior. So we're starting the process with him. I just got bogged down and I couldn't make it. And so I told my husband, he was like, "Ooh, they're getting honored." He was like, "They invited you?" And I was like, "Yeah, I've just met them and I wanted to go hang out." So I didn't get to come, but I felt like, in absentia that there was honor, spread out for all of us Second Amendment advocates, because you're getting that recognition, because it's a group of women who have all these other things that you guys do. It's not just a group of women who only do gun stuff. You have lives just like everyone else, husbands, children, family, your personal lives, your work, and you still manage to be writers, radio hosts, podcasters, and do all of these things to enable women to protect themselves with the Second Amendment. And so that being said, the news that we've been dealing with for the past few weeks since the Parkland shooting has centered largely around vilification of gun owners and people who believe in the Second Amendment. And I wanted to get your take on that. Like, how are you pushing back against that? How are you talking to people when they start to say, well, it's the NRA's fault? What are you saying in response to that?
Well, I think if you're looking for somebody to blame, you can find anybody to blame. And I think that's where that comes in. I mean, and the NRA is the biggest lobbyist group for gun owners and Second Amendment rights, and so they are getting the heat for it just because they're the ones that are visible and that are making a lot of the statements and everything else. But, I think it just goes back to continually educating people. You're hearing a lot of these words of assault weapons. What's an assault weapon? There is no such thing as an assault weapon. They use that term with ARs, assault rifles. Well, the actual terminology, it was called AR for Armalite rifle. And,
say it again, Stacy.
High capacity clip. Well,
because everyone thinks it means assault rifle.
Not a high capacity clip. It doesn't stand for assault rifle. Those are the type of things that you're hearing, and unless you know better, you assume, okay, well, that's accurate. And, there's a lot of bias in the media that will sway things one way or the other, however they want it to look. And so that's all we're really trying to do, is continually educate in the truth of what that looks like and alternate methods. The gun control is not going to, unfortunately, stop these tragedies from happening. It's, that there is evil in the world, and anybody that is intent on doing harm to somebody else is going to do it one way or the other. It could be with their vehicle, it could be with a knife, it could be, a bomb. It doesn't matter. They're going to get their hands on things, and just because there is legislative measures in place does not mean that it's going to stop somebody. We put these gun-free zone signs on the buildings, but they're still going to go in there and do this. They don't stop and go, oh, darn, I can't commit murder today because the sign out there says I can't have a gun.
Right.
Well, so...
you're making.
I don't know if that answered your question.
No,
but,
it does. It does.
It's education.
It does. You're making some great points, and I'm just laughing because it's so patently obvious that someone who plans to go kill a bunch of people is not going to pay attention to a piece of paper that says gun-free zone. I mean, it's not like they run back to the car and say,
right,
no guns, but I'm still going to kill people. I'm just going to use bombs or grenades. I gotta swap out my killing methods because no guns are allowed in this building. That's not how this thing works. And so we really, what we need is more women who are the ones who feel comfortable or the ones who are willing to learn to join groups like the Well-Armed Woman or the NRA or like you said, there's so many other groups. It's not as if the NRA is the only group out there. There are other groups. You join a group or even just say, I want to attend one of your range days and go to the range with these people. Not because you hate them or you hate guns, but because you want to check it out so you're informed. Because I always feel like if you hate something and you know a lot about it, more power to you. So if you've been to the range and you've fired guns, you've been around NRA people and you don't like them, and then you say as much, I'm fine with that because you've given it all a try and it wasn't for you. I'm not okay with people who continually bash these things and they've never fired a gun, but you're going to teach me, as you just were mentioning. So you're an expert. Please explain to us. You've already exposed the complete lunacy of people calling an AR-15 an assault rifle 15. That's not even a thing. Clips versus magazines. Talk to us about clips versus magazines, because people call them magazine clips, automatic clips, automatic magazines. These are not words that are interchangeable and go together.
Right. So a magazine is something that holds your ammunition, whether it's a handgun or a rifle. It's like a box or a long container that has that ammunition. A clip is just a little piece of metal, for the most part, that helps assist to load a magazine. So there's these like little metal clips that you would put 6 or 7 rounds of ammunition in, and then those slide down into, or where you can push them down into a magazine to load the magazine. But you can't use a clip in a gun. It doesn't go in the gun. It's just a little piece of metal. If you look at it, you go, okay, I get that. But again, like you said, those terms are used interchangeably, and that they absolutely should not be if you have any education in firearms at all. And that's, again, where there's so many different things going on. I mean, I saw a news report just the other day with one of these anti-gun women who were saying, and it showed a picture of a .22 bolt-action rifle, and she was saying these should not be in the hands of, 18-year-olds or up. Well, it's a bolt-action .22, just like many of us learned how to shoot with, you have to assist the bolt forward to put a round in there and then pull it back to eject each casing and then forward again to put another one in there. But because this one had some of those scary black-looking parts to it, maybe a red dot sight, some different things, she would say, oh, this is one of those guns that we should be banning, when she doesn't even know anything about it. So it's unfortunately it's sad, but that is a lot of the talking points. Is they just don't get it, but they're still spewing the same thing that they're hearing, and it's just regurgitating it out. And even though they don't know what they're talking about, like using clips and magazines and ARs, and what does that really mean? It's crazy.
It is. And so let's talk a little bit about because you've trained on many different firearms, and so you have the experience of kind of trying out more than just the AR-15, and it is, I call it the boogeyman of choice. It's one of those things where they've latched onto it because it's common and because it is preferred by women because it doesn't have as much recoil. Speaking from experience, so I'm not spouting off stuff I don't know. I actually have fired AR-15s and other long guns, and I know for a fact that the AR-15 has less recoil. It's still loud, but there's not as much kick, which means with my weaker upper body strength, I'm able to hold it and fire accurately, where another gun has more recoil and it's harder for me to wield. And I'm 6'2" tall. So if I were 5'5" or 4'11", it would be even more difficult for me to hold that bigger firearm and still maintain control of it and be accurate if I were trying to shoot it, as opposed to the AR-15. But what other guns have similar functionality that are being ignored that can basically serve as replacements for AR-15s, basically making the idea of banning them useless?
Well, any rifle really that, normally people would look at as maybe a hunting rifle or something like that. The basic mechanisms are the same. On a lot of them is a semi-automatic. I mean, some of them are bolt action. So if you've got a semi-automatic rifle that you use as a hunting rifle, but now all of a sudden you change out the wood stock and you put on the black Magpul furniture type, those type of things, and it looks scary. That's why I use it, and it's more of the look than it is how it actually functions. And I've heard so many people that, again, are against AR specifically say things like, so it's fully automatic. Well, no, fully automatic is not what that is. You have to have a special tax stamp or permit to get a full
from
auto
the ATF
firearm of any kind.
I mean, it's not from like your local gun shop. It's from the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Agency. So, you know, it's not like you
can't just go down to your local pawn shop and pick it up.
Right. It's just not available to you readily for any old person. Yeah. Okay, we have the music. Would you like to hold over so you can finish this?
Is a semi-automatic, like,
Let's hold you over so you can finish explaining this, because I want people to understand. And because we're having fun talking Stacy to Stacy. So hold on real quick. And listeners, stay there. She's going to finish with her expert knowledge, the truth about AR-15s and other guns that are similar, right after these messages here on Stacy on the Right. We'll be right back.
What does it take to live an uncommon life? Here's former Super Bowl winning coach Tony Dungy with today's uncommon moment.
At the start of the 2009 NFL season, I spoke to the Minnesota Vikings at their chapel service, and I told the story of the prodigal son. Now, most of the time when we hear this story, we highlight the younger son who makes a mess of his life before returning home. But in my experience, the older brother in the story isn't talked about very much. He displays a "that's not fair" attitude when his father welcomes his younger brother back. What about the leadership of the older brother? I suggested to the Vikings that no one was in a better position to mentor than the older brother. I wonder what would have happened had he really mentored his younger brother. What about you? Is there someone in your life that needs you to help them, to mentor them?
Tony Dungy. Discover more at CoachDungy.com. That's CoachDungy.com.
I'm Will Addison, Director of Urban Family Talk. We desire to be a movement of time tellers. In 1 Chronicles 12:32 it says, "The sons of Issachar were men who had understanding of the time, to know what Israel ought to do." In these perilous times, God is raising up a people of discernment who will see, pray, and act. We sound the alarm as watchmen. We cry aloud that God's people may be activated for His service. Join the movement at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Abraham Hamilton III.
God put us in this world at this time to be salt and light. We don't fold because of the darkness that we're facing. This is not the first time in the world's history that it's gotten dark. God has called you and I to be His ambassadors, even in this dark moment.
Tune in to the Hamilton Corner, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk.
More than 1 million believers have signed the pledge to boycott Target, and we urge you to join them. The American Family Association opposes the policy of Target allowing transgenders into the bathroom of their choice. Here's AFA President Tim Wildman.
There's a reason why we've had male and female separation in restrooms and fitting rooms for all of mankind's history.
A policy which allows men into women's restrooms and fitting rooms is not right, nor is it safe.
I just can't see corporate executives at Target or anywhere else sitting around a table going, you know, guys, I think we need to open up our women's restrooms for men.
Visit afa.net to learn more and sign the pledge to boycott Target. Don't spend your money at Target until they stop putting our family members at risk with this dangerous, politically correct policy.
Protect your wives, daughters, your sisters, your moms. Don't shop at Target. Let them know.
That's afa.net.
This is Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the show. At Stacy on the Right on Twitter and Instagram, and StacyOnTheRight.com is the website. Take our poll over at UrbanFamilyTalk.com, and you can also visit AFR.net for fantastic content from our parent syndicator. Also carries the Stacy on the Right show over there. We are slamming and jamming through the show, and really lucky to have Stacy Bright with us for a second segment to continue to share her knowledge and expertise about the dreaded boogeyman of choice, the AR-15, Armalite Rifle 15. Here's a hint. There used to be an AR-10. I think you can still buy those. And that was an earlier version of the current iteration, which is called the AR-15, of which we happen to own. I'll just share with you one. So not for lack of wanting more, but I have other. We have other things that we've purchased. So it's really fun to shoot. And for leftists who are listening and thinking she's bloodthirsty, no. Just like it's fun to drive off-road vehicles and dirt bikes, it's fun to ski and bounce up and down on the snow. It's fun to snowboard. It's fun to slide down the water slide. It's fun to swim. Just like it's fun to use all kinds of different tools, it's really fun to master shooting a firearm and then to be able to accurately shoot it and hit your mark on the target, or to feel as if you're proficient with it in handling it and loading it and unloading it and cleaning it. That's all we're referring to, because as far as I know, Stacy Bright, nor I, or any of the other people that I know that are Second Amendment proponents or members of the NRA or any other good group have ever killed anyone. So it's not about killing at all. It's about mastering a tool. So you were explaining, Stacy, and we're speaking with Stacy Bright, NRA Firearms Instructor, writer, radio host, NRA Certified Pistol and Rifle Instructor, so many other fantastic things, an expert. We're speaking to her about the AR-15, the Armalite Rifle 15. So you were saying, you were describing the AR-15 and comparing it to other rifles and that type of thing. Please go on.
Well, I was just going to add that I think a lot of people see that AR-15, and because of the terminology of full automatic or even semi-automatic, they don't understand how that operates. And they really have to understand that every time you pull the trigger, only one round, one bullet is going to exit the barrel of that gun. And then you have to release the trigger and squeeze the trigger again for another one to go. It's not, you can hold on to the trigger and it's just like a machine gun, as they would call it. And again, that's the full auto, which again requires that special permission. So I think it's again, go back to education. You have to understand how the gun operates. And the reason you had mentioned right before, with the AR-15 being a good model for women or men, the founder, Carrie Lightfoot, she's the founder of the Well-Armed Woman. She actually recently went on a panel on CNN, the morning show, and was talking about how that is a perfect gun for women, especially for home defense. So you've got plenty of rounds of ammunition in that magazine. It's light enough that you can shoulder the gun. You can practice with the gun, which is always important, to be able to understand that. And, it's not this big, bad gun that's going to go out and hurt people, because, just you said it, it's a tool. Anything in the wrong hands can be used for evil, or it can be used for good. And evil, or trying to make a tool evil, doesn't make it evil. It's the person itself. So we just have to keep going back to that and understand there's a lot of different options out there, a lot of different rifles, handguns, doesn't matter what. It's really the person that's using it that has to be looked at versus the tool itself.
Absolutely. And I want to correct that. Carrie Lightfoot is the founder of the Well-Armed Woman, and I did get to meet her at SHOT Show. Really just a group of amazing women. We were gathered around the Project Child Safe booth, and they had an event for us. And then there was another event later that was sponsored by the NRA, and we were able to meet even more fantastic advocates for the Second Amendment. I felt like it was a privilege for me to be there, because many of these women, like yourself, have been working and training with firearms and training other people with them for years, and really just experts. When I say experts, I have a lot of respect for people who take the time to learn about something and then take the time to learn about it to the degree that they can teach other people. I think that is something that we kind of discount in today's society, and we don't have enough people doing that. And so when we see someone who's doing it, we need to say, thank you so much for doing it, and encourage other people to kind of get on the path, start learning more, and see if it might be a good fit for you. So I also want to talk a little bit about you. You are a concealed carry instructor, and you specifically instruct women on concealed carriage. Would you give us like 3 of your top tips for carrying concealed well as a woman? Because our clothing options make it a little bit different for us when we're trying to make sure we're not printing and showing off the fact that we're concealed carrying.
Well, I think the first thing is you need to find the firearm that fits you well and not necessarily fits on your body well, but fits in your hand. That's something that you would enjoy shooting, because it does come back to practicing and training. Just because you have a gun doesn't mean you know how to use it well. Doesn't mean you're safe with it. Doesn't mean that you know all of the laws once you do start concealing that on your person. So it starts with getting the right gun. I would say the next thing, like you said, with clothing, each of us are different, you know, tall, short, petite, round, and we're all built differently, and we are built differently than men because we have hips, we have curves. It's a lot more difficult for us to carry a firearm concealed than it is a man, because they're just straight up and down. They can throw on any type of shirt, and it seems to hide the gun, the printing, you know, where you can see the outline of that gun. So for women, I just say, you know, it is a matter of preference as far as what you normally wear, your typical clothing, and then trying to find the right holster to go with that. You know, if you are always wearing dresses, you're not going to necessarily be able to wear a gun on your waist. You may need a side holster. You may need a bra holster. And yes, they make those. So, you know, doing the research for what holster fits you and well, and then from there, you know, clothing options are, you know, if you have patterns in your clothing, different colorations, it seems to hide that gun better than if it's a solid pattern. And then from there, more training. You have a gun that you're carrying concealed. How do you get that gun out? How do you access the holster and then be able to use it in a self-defense situation if you ever had to, quickly, under pressure, under stress, when all else, you know, you're just focused on that threat, so that you're also not injuring yourself or anybody else around you.
Yeah, those are all great tips. And I encourage you, if you want to find the podcast to this, you can obviously go to the YouTube page where we live stream there, and then the show is up forever afterwards. And then we also have urbanfamilytalk.com/Stacy if you want the audio version. You can also find those on TuneIn, where we live stream the show. But if you want the podcast itself, iTunes and Google Play both carry the Stacy on the Right Show podcast that you can subscribe to, so you'll have that audio, and you can play that clip of Stacy Bright, who is a firearms instructor, a writer, an expert, telling you some tips on how to conceal carry properly as a woman. That's good stuff for you to know. And then more information like that, well, she has like a million websites. girlsandgunsgearreview.com. That's where you can see all the cool latest stuff, which I got to see some of at SHOT Show. I had no idea there were that many more holster options, and I thought I knew a lot. So wherever you think you want to carry your firearm, there's a woman who's made a product to help you do it. And it's out there, and all you have to do is find it, and then you can purchase it and support businesses that are out there to make carriage easier for all of us as women. So girlsandgunsgearreview.com, thewellarmedwoman.com, TWAW shootingchapters.org if you want to join a shooting chapter and learn from women how to shoot. And also, she's a radio host. They have a fantastic podcast, and Missouri Conceal Carry Instructor, which means if you're in the state of Missouri and you feel like traveling a little bit, Stacy could teach you and get you conceal carry certified. So I think that's all the cool websites and everything. And it has been such a pleasure to speak with you. I'm going to have you back on again so we can talk more about guns and cool stuff and have Stacy to Stacy time. How about it?
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Stacy.
All right. You guys enjoy the Capitol today. And thanks for coming on, and we'll talk again soon.
All right. Will do.
All right, that's Stacy Bright. I love it when I meet cool chicks who know how to do cool stuff. And so they actually have a Well-Armed Woman chapter in my neck of the woods here in St. Louis. And so I'm not actually a member of a gun club or anything. So that's going to be my next thing, is carving out some time once we wrestle down these where are you going to college things and wrestle down for the second kid. I should have some of my own free time back where I can do some stuff like this. And I'm looking forward to it. I really am. I loved meeting. There were so many great women that I got to meet at SHOT Show, at the events that they had geared up for us, and men. There were just great people in general. So I also want to, get a little bit more info in. We've got this, and this is a bit of a pivot, but you stick with me. The FBI's Aussie Trump Russia tipster linked to firm that U.S. intel chiefs have distrusted for years. So you know the stories that we've got going on. We need to drop that line. The stories that we've had going on, and this is by Mark Tapscott. So all of these things are intersecting together on these. So the Russia investigation. And while you guys know my opinion about this is that there was no collusion, the investigation is yielding some results and showing that there was a lot of interaction between some Russian oligarchs and the Podesta group. And so this is just another cog in this huge wheel. This Australian diplomat tipped the FBI about a London pub conversation that led to the massive probe of allegations of collusion between the 2016 Trump campaign and Russia. This guy, Alexander Downer, is himself closely tied to a Chinese firm experts say is deeply involved in, wait for it, espionage against America. Scratch a scandal. You guys know the rest of that. So just last month, all 6 top U.S. intelligence bosses warned Americans against using digital communications equipment produced by Chinese smartphone producer Huawei. And that's Huawei. Now, I don't remember seeing that, but I'm an Apple iPhone user. So, I mean, you know, not applicable. The quote from the Senate Intelligence Committee during a February 13th hearing was, "We're deeply concerned about the risks of allowing any company or entity that is beholden to foreign governments that don't share our values to gain positions of power inside our telecommunications networks." And that was FBI Director Chris Wray, and he was speaking to the Senate Intelligence Committee. That provides the capacity to exert pressure or control over our telecommunications infrastructure. It provides the capacity to maliciously modify or steal information, and it provides the capacity to conduct undetected espionage. So why am I talking to you about this? Well, the most important thing for all of us to understand is that there is espionage going on, that Russia does want to impact things that go on in this country, but they're not so concerned with the different political parties. So if you accept that information, which Putin said, he told Megyn Kelly, he's made similar statements in the past, he's not concerned about Democrats versus Republicans. He's concerned with manipulating Americans to destabilize our ability to actively exert our efforts in a singular mind. Because Americans, when trained in and focused on something in unison, we are a powerful force. Don't believe me? Look at the history. Anytime Americans have kind of woken up out of our sleepy slumber of, you know, bedroom communities, work, play, church, and school, and looked around the globe and seen something we don't like, we have dominated. Now, it's not because we're so perfect and fantastic. It's because Judeo-Christian values, the hand of God, the blessing of the Almighty, favor. That's why we're able to do that. So if you were a foreign entity and you wanted to exert command and control over an area, and every time you try to put together a plan, you have to worry about Americans getting together and exerting their government and their influence through our massive military apparatus, or we have our fingers in every single pie. That's what all that foreign aid is about. Paying for access to foreign governments so that we can make a phone call. You pick up the red phone and you call the world leader over there. And because we're spending $7 billion a year in U.S. aid in their country, they're going to answer that phone and they're going to listen to what we have to say. And they're going to be much more open to doing what we want. That's what the U.S. aid is about. Then if you're in Russia, you definitely don't want that. You don't want that. You don't want Americans to be able to stop you from doing what you want to do in Syria or the Ukraine. So the meddling in our elections is not about deciding whether it's Trump or Clinton. It's about sowing seeds of division so Americans don't trust each other, so we can get against each other instead of, in unison, acting as a nation with a singular mind, which is, you know, you would think American sovereignty, American first, justice, peace, the American way, more democratically controlled nations, less oligarchies, less autocracies and dictatorships. Understand that. This is not about Clinton versus Trump. Not for foreign world leaders, it's not. Not for Putin. All right. When we get back, we'll have hour 2 of Stacy on the Right. Stay right there.
Urban Family Talk.
The sexual revolution is falsely promised to satisfy the human heart.
God has a better way. If we follow God's prescription.
Dr. Michael Brown offers hope for those trapped in the downward spiral of sexual immorality. The Freedom of Sexual Purity is a powerful DVD from the AFA Cultural Institute. Get your copy today at afastore.net.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke at the AIPAC Policy Conference, the largest gathering of America's pro-Israel community. Netanyahu talked about Iran's threat to his country, detailing what Tehran is doing.
Seeking to develop, to build precision-guided missile factories in Syria and Lebanon against Israel. I will not let that happen. We will not let that happen.
Republican leaders are splitting with the White House over a proposal for new tariffs. Jared Halpern has more.
House Speaker Paul Ryan agrees there is a problem with steel being dumped in the U.S. for lower prices, but says the tariff proposal from President Trump requires a more surgical approach.
We've had multiple conversations about this. He knows our view. Every now and then, we're just going to have a different approach on how we should tackle these problems.
Other Republican leaders are also signaling opposition to a 25% tariff on all imported steel and a 10% tariff on all imported aluminum, some suggesting a legislative solution. President Trump has linked the tariffs in part to ongoing NAFTA negotiations, saying he won't back down. On Capitol Hill, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
Mike Huckabee resigned from a Country Music Association charity after a gay record producer complained about his biblical views of marriage and family. But Steve Jordahl reports the group certainly didn't put up much of a fight on Huckabee's behalf.
In 2006, Josh Turner had this song, which topped out at number 16 on the country charts.
Ain't nobody gonna come between me and God.
It may be more than a decade later, but gay record producer Jason Owens couldn't be blamed for thinking he can get between the country music world and the Almighty after he put up a fuss when the Country Music Association Foundation invited former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee to be on its board of directors.
They invited me. I didn't seek them out. They sought me out because I don't think there's any governor who has been more involved in bringing music and arts programs to public schools.
Appearing on the Todd Starnes Show, Huckabee said Owens threatened to pull his support from the foundation that provides musical instruments to underprivileged kids and advocates for arts programs in public schools.
Because of my Christian convictions regarding marriage and because of my membership in the NRA, my conservative views, none of which had a thing to do with the foundation. The complaints were that I was unfit to be on the foundation board.
Huckabee might have put up more of a fight, but he was on a plane when the controversy broke out.
I said, well, if you want me to resign, if that's what you're asking me to do, and by the time I landed, it was being announced that I had resigned.
He says he's not angry, just sad that gay activists made it harder for poor kids to have music in their lives. I'm Steve Jordahl.
A media watchdog group is holding companies accountable for sponsoring a new show that is sending the wrong message to teenagers. Bill Bumpus reports.
NBC's new comedy drama Good Girls centers around 3 struggling moms who turn to robbery in an attempt to make ends meet. Monica Cole, director of 1millionmoms.com, a ministry of the American Family Association, says the show should not be on primetime broadcast TV.
The content is so vile, I can't even discuss it over the air, but you can imagine with the graphic content, not only is there violence and sexual innuendos and encounters, there is the foul language. It's pretty much all compiled in this show.
Cole tells AFN that according to the ratings, the show is appropriate for most teenagers.
The TV rating system finds this appropriate for 14-year-olds and up, when this should not be seen by teenagers or let alone anyone.
1millionmoms.com is contacting advertisers of Good Girls, urging them not to be financially associated with this program's unsuitable content. I'm Bill Bumpus.
And the Senate moved closer today to passing legislation to roll back some of the safeguards Congress put in place to prevent a repeat of the financial crisis. Enough Democrats supported a procedural vote on the bipartisan bill to ensure its passage by the Republican majority Senate. American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com and download the One News Now mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Victory McIntosh.
Early will I seek thee, O Lord. Man, it's something about when you start your morning off right with Abba, Father. I'm telling you, will the enemy come? Of course, he's going to do his job. But it should motivate you even more. Man, I got to stay connected to the vine of Jesus. How do you do that? By getting into the Word of God. You got to do it.
Tune in to Word on the Street with Victory McIntosh. Saturdays at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk. Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
Families who lost loved ones in the shooting at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School say they're determined to make sure their sons and daughters' legacies will be remembered, fighting for safer schools and challenging lawmakers to do the same.
What we want to know here is how we're going to make our kids safe, going to school every day, and not just our kids, all of your kids.
The Florida Senate's back in session today and feeling the pressure.
The Senate will be in order.
Lawmakers are struggling to find a compromise.
What if the sheriff wants the guardian program and the school superintendent or the school board doesn't? Who wins out?
The superintendent wins that battle all day.
They already argued for more than 8 hours during a rare special session in Tallahassee on Saturday. The proposed legislation would raise the minimum age to purchase a gun to 21 and impose a 3-day waiting period for gun purchases. But the major hang-up remains the school marshal program, a plan that would allow for some teachers to be armed in the classroom on a voluntary basis.
What do we want? Change! When do we want it?
Now! What's not in this bill? A ban on assault and assault-style weapons, something that student activists in Parkland have been pushing for. An amendment that would have outlawed those weapons was voted down by the Senate last week. Next, the bill heads to the Republican-controlled House, where it's likely to face another uphill battle.
So welcome back to Stacy on the Right. Call lines are open at 866-963-2037. And I have to say, I'm so tired of the news people, news readers, reporters, talking heads, anchors, hosts, whatever you want to call them. I'm tired of everyone in media calling firearms, long guns, assault weapons. I mean, do we even care what words mean anymore? It's very frustrating. It's very frustrating to hear them use that term over and over and over again. They refuse to ban assault weapons. So a generally misapplied term. What guns specifically? Well, of course, boogeyman of choice, AR-15. That's what they really meant. So they passed a bill to put restrictions on gun sales, which you'll be hearing more from me about that. I had some words about that, so I'll share that once that's up and live. We'll get into that a little bit, and I'll share some more detailed info with you. I know we have tens of thousands of people under the age of 21 who are currently serving in our armed forces, and I just wonder how they feel about the fact that after these retailers make their decisions, they're going to come home and at certain stores, they can't buy firearms that they fired the military grade version of on active duty. So you can fire them for your country, but you can't own them as a civilian in the same country. Citizen, but as long as we're accommodating the virtue signaling of the left, by all means, let's just be arbitrary in our leanings towards who can own what and at what point in their lives they can own it. Let's just be arbitrary. Let's not have any rhyme or reason to it. And certainly let's not pay attention to the Constitution or the laws of this country, which have already been adjudicated on this issue. Equal treatment under the law. It means if you're allowed to do something in one locale at one age, you're allowed to do it in all locales at that age. Federal law says that a person who's 18 years old can purchase a firearm if they meet the criteria, meaning they're not a felon, prohibited possessor, mentally ill, not a citizen of this country, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So now I want to move over to this GOP rep. She's at an event and she's minding her own business. And one of the reporters approaches her with a question about the Parkland shooting. And it's Claudia Tenney. She's a Republican from New York. And she gets into this heated argument with a reporter at a campaign stop after he asked her about her claims that so many of the people who commit the mass murders end up being Democrats. Now, we know that Democrats like to hide that information, but what was the political affiliation of the individual who gunned down the people on the baseball mound, including Majority Whip Scalise? He was a Democrat, a Bernie Sanders supporter and a Democrat. Now, the media didn't report on that. They just skimmed right over it. But what do you think Nicholas Cruz's political affiliations were, his leanings were, growing up in Broward County, where every bit of it is all liberals all day? Can't talk about that. Now, if they think he's some kind of white supremacist, they automatically say white supremacist equals Republican, so Republicans are responsible for this. But if it's a Democrat, oh no, the person had Hillary stuff all over their Facebook and everything. Oh, sorry, no, we can't talk about that. So listen to her basically go off on this reporter. It's number 4.
Comments that I made about what?
On the Fred Dippers radio show.
Yeah, we're not talking. Look, first of all, okay. We took a commitment to civility. I implore everyone, turn on CNN, turn on the news media on the left, and watch every day the constant drumbeat of blame to Republicans, the hysteria over President Trump, the constant Russia collusion story, which is now turning out to be a farce. Look at the constant, just vicious rhetoric coming out of the resist movement every single day. Did you listen to what I said?
I did.
Yeah. So every single day.
Organizations have said they're mostly false statements.
Yeah. Actually, they're not false statements, but let me tell you what this is. The false statements every single day. The media, the Democrats, what are they doing? Turn on the media. The drumbeat every single day is it's Republicans, the NRA, the Republicans cause all of these things to happen. I don't think so at all. I'm telling the truth. There's inequality here. Not all of these people who commit terrible crimes. Are you going to let me answer the question? Let me answer the question. We're not going to. The question is, you don't want to hear a truthful answer. You don't want to know that this problem occurs across all sectors with all kinds of people. It isn't just Republicans who commit all these terrible crimes. It is across all sectors, and it is people who are typically mentally unstable that are committing a lot of the crimes that we're seeing. And the abhorrent behavior of the media in promoting and the rhetoric coming from the Democrats.
And it's really, I have to say, it's really big of her to say that, and not to point to the fact that a lot of these people, they like a lot of Democratic pages on Facebook and there's online social media. They're Bernie Sanders supporters. She's attributing it to mental illness, which many of them have that as well. And that is it's a big thing for her to do. It's big of her to do that. And so, good for her for being better than the reporter was. And notice how he filibustered her. He didn't let her answer the questions. And he just kept hitting her over and over and over again with repetitive questions because that increases the tension in the interaction. And these reporters actually know what they're doing. If you watch them, when they approach elected officials at these events, they don't ask a question and permit the person to answer. They just keep pounding the person until you can feel it. It happens to any person. It happens to me when I go on. Every time I've been on CNN, my friend who does my makeup always says, I can tell when they start agitating because your breathing changes. It's just, it's unfortunate because instead of getting the answer and then just working with the answer, he's basically got a preconceived notion he's working off of, and he's going to keep hitting her on the questions until the whole discourse is ruined. And then he's done his job. He's got a clip of her or some video or some audio of her, and she's agitated and she's yelled fake news at him because it eventually she says, "You're fake news," because he won't even allow her to finish a thought. It's pathetic. So, and that was actually a setup for last segment, but we got a chance to speak to Stacy Bright for an extended period of time. So we are getting to that just now at the top of this hour. Welcome to Stacy on the Right, hour 2 of the show. If you're just tuning in, thanks for being here. StacyOnTheRight.com, AFR.net, UrbanFamilyTalk.com. So now I want to pivot over to Laura Ingraham, who covered this whole thing with the Promise Program, which the Promise Program. So I reported, I believe on the show, I believe I said that the Obama administration started the Promise Program. But what the truth is, the Promise Program was started in Broward County. So they said too many black kids are getting arrested, too many kids of color, too many minorities, too many of them are getting arrested and taken out of school and put into the prison system. So we're not going to arrest for every single infraction that we could to give these kids a chance to stay in school. The Obama administration noticed that their numbers of arrests had gone down significantly, and they decided to replicate the program at the federal level so that school districts across the country would get these guidelines and use them and stop arresting kids. Now, notice I didn't say kids are getting training, kids are learning right from wrong, kids are no longer committing infractions. Everybody's still committing infractions at the same rate, doing all the same wrong stuff. They're just not getting punished for it. So listen to Laura Ingraham. She describes how Florida schools ignored violent students, enabling Nicholas Cruz to eventually go on to kill 17 people. Number 2. It's cut 2.
The more we learn about the school shooting in Florida, the more it appears that a Broward County invention may have played a role in what happened. And what am I talking about? In 2013, Broward County and their new school superintendent, Robert Runcie, had a novel idea. Lower school expulsions and arrests by reducing police involvement. Sounds simple. They called it the Promise Program. Preventing recidivism through opportunities, mentoring, intervention, support, and education. It's quite an acronym. You see, in 2011 into 2012 school year, Broward had the highest public school-related arrest record in the state. More than 1,000 kids in that year alone were arrested. The Obama administration Education Secretary Arne Duncan and Attorney General Eric Holder were so impressed by the Promise Plan that it inspired their own new national guidelines.
As it stands, far too many students across this country are diverted from the path to success by unnecessarily harsh discipline policies and practices that exclude them from school for really minor infractions. Too often, so-called zero-tolerance policies, however well-intentioned they might be, make students feel unwelcome in their own schools. They disrupt the learning process, and they can have significant and lasting negative effects on the long-term well-being of our young people.
Well, I'd say a violent kid whose outbursts are tolerated week after week, leading years later to a school shooting, also has lasting negative effects on young people and disrupts the learning process, Eric.
Okay, so here's what we've got going on. There's one surefire way to change the behavior of students, and that is to have a clear-cut disciplinary plan of action in place in a school building, and then to have it followed to the letter. The first thing that has to happen is in the school building, the rules have to be very clear, and then the teachers and administrators, everybody who's in the leadership mix has to agree to those rules and agree to, it doesn't matter if it's the most popular kid, if it's the prettiest kid, if it's the shortest kid, the tallest kid. It doesn't matter what the kid's home life is like. It doesn't matter what what excuses they give. Certain infractions bring certain consequences, and you apply that across the board so kids see there's no one special, there's no one different. These rules apply to all of us, and you see discipline it comes into good regular order. That's the first step. The second step, because we're dealing with this from the end, because this is what I hate about all the solutions that are being proposed. They say, we have a huge problem. You go to the end result of the problem and you say, this is where we're going to fix it. You fix disciplinary issues in the home. Now, this is a much more difficult thing for school districts to do, because how do school districts make parents invest in their kids with time, energy, love, and get kids to start respecting their parents? That means whole kinds of changes that schools can't force. So schools have to work within the parameters and what they have. They have the kids during the day. They don't have them in the middle of the night. They don't have them at dinner time. They don't have them at those crucial moments where parenting meets the child and changes that child's life. And this is an ongoing process. Show me any A student who's playing musical instruments and working a part-time job and is what other people would say a stellar kid, and I'll show you a kid who probably last night just had a big long talking to about not doing their chores before they go to bed, or spending too much time on their phone, or possibly being disrespectful. Parenting is a never-ending process that takes a whole lot of commitment that many millions of parents are not putting in, which puts the onus on these school districts, who then put the onus on these police officers, who then arrest kids and put them in prison. Until we start dealing with that, all these Band-Aids will only be so much Band-Aids on top of gaping cesspool-type wounds. But at least we now know how this whole thing got started. So we'll get back into it a little bit more after our guest next segment. We have Dr. Kay Cole James, president of the Heritage Foundation, up next. You guys, stay tuned.
Well, September weather in Washington, D.C. is generally very, very nice. Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. Our June tour sold out. We've only got seats left for our September Spiritual Heritage Tour of Washington, D.C. and George Washington's Mount Vernon. Now, for all the information on this trip, just go to the website spiritualheritagetours.com, spiritualheritagetours.com. We're also going to Williamsburg, Jamestown, and Yorktown. So if you want to do that tour as well, all the information again is available at spiritualheritagetours.com. Those trips, Williamsburg and Washington, are back to back. We're going to have a wonderful time with listeners from all over the country to American Family Radio on our Spiritual Heritage Tour in September. Again, for all the information, go to our website, spiritualheritagetours.com.
This is Mason Weaver, bringing you the truth right between their lies.
This is Mason, and welcome back to the program. You know, God expects you to recognize the name He has given you. He expects you to recognize His name, because names are important to God. Name proclaims the mystery of God. Names proclaim the prophecy of God. Methuselah meant basically, when he dies, the world ends. You do a chart of the lives of Abraham, of Adam through Noah. You will see when Methuselah died, the world came to an end. Names mean something biblically. God names nations. He named tribes. He named individuals and families based on His prophecy to you, so you can see through the names who they are. But black folks, our names don't mean anything. Our names are slave names. Master gave us a name so that we could have something to answer to. It wasn't historical. It wasn't based on family. It wasn't based on where you're going. It wasn't based on your history. It meant nothing to you. So today, our names mean nothing to us. So I'm wondering, what is it? Why don't we get back to the name that God proclaimed for us? The name He gave us. Saved, righteous, worth dying for, worth living for. Name your family, name your children, real names. Names that mean something. Proclaim over their name who they are and whose they are and where they're going and what they're going to be doing. Show the world that you are a Christian. Show the world that you are saved by grace by the name you give your children. That's who you are. This is Mason, back in a minute with the truth between the lies.
You have been listening to Mason Weaver. Our email address is clarenceamason@clarenceamason.com. Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the show. I want to go to the second bit of audio from Laura Ingraham on the Promise program, funneling millions of dollars into schools to fix, quote unquote, fix broken homes, and kind of piggyback on what I was just saying at the end of last segment. Let's get this thing going. It's number 3.
President Jeff Bell revealed this to me last week.
They don't want the police officers making arrests.
Broward County Sheriff Union President Jeff Bell revealed this to me last week.
They don't want the police officers making arrests on campus, and they don't want the drugs to be found on campus, and they don't want the warrants to be served on campus because it looks like there's bad stats at the school. So I place a lot of blame on the school board with that and some of the programs that they've initiated with the state attorney and the sheriff's office in the years past. For example, the Promise program. The problem is with them, when that program started, we took all discretion away from the law enforcement officers to in effect an arrest if we choose to.
That was stunning. Now, Broward School Superintendent Robert Runcie, Sheriff Israel, and the Obama bureaucrats that created this perverse incentive to hide student criminality or downplay it have a lot of explaining to do. By turning Broward schools and those across the nation into these social justice petri dishes, they may have facilitated a lunatic, and their soft policies have turned our schools into soft targets. And that's the angle.
And so she says may have. I say they did. I say they I say that there's absolutely no reason why we should kind of equivocate or act as if something different is going on. Now, okay, so guys, live radio, I put on my show sheet that Dr. Kay Cole James is coming on at 3:20. She's actually coming on at 3:40. So that's my error. So we're going to continue on with the show. We're going to speak with her in the next segment, which gives us a little bit more flow, and we'll close out the show with her. But that's actually my mistake. So we're talking about this issue, and it's a huge problem. Here's the bigger deal. As long as we're ignoring the negative outcomes that come from the familial degradation that's currently plaguing our culture, then we're going to see these eruptions. It's like a person, for lack of a better analogy, here goes. It's like a person who constantly runs around trying all of the new latest skincare products. And they're trying to deal with acne and blemishes and all kinds of things going on with the skin. And the skin is the largest organ on the body. The skin actually is a great barometer for the health of the person. So you can buy certain products. You can buy prescription strength products that will deal with the effects of having a bad diet, not exercising, not getting enough rest. But if you really want to make, seismic changes to skin, you have to start on the inside. So you have to drink the right amount of water. You have to get the right amount of sleep. You have to treat the skin properly by protecting it from the sun. And when you start to do that, I've seen YouTube videos of people who say in as little as 5 days, you can radically change the quality of your skin by simply drinking a gallon of water a day. Now, I used to think that was malarkey, but I drink a lot more water now than I did when I had more skin problems. And it's so the analogy fits. What we're doing is we're saying, hey, we know there's a whole lot of problems with this skin we've got here, but we're just going to keep hacking away at it on the outside. We're not going to deal with any of the problems on the inside, which is how you get good skin. And how do you get well-behaved kids at school who respect authority, who listen, who are there to learn? Well, it starts in the home. I remember years ago, and obviously it was years ago because this was when our daughter was 3. So the oldest one was 3. And we were trying to find a house in a certain school district. And before we actually moved in, I called over. This shows you how much of I was an info addict and a control freak. I called over and spoke to the lady at the front desk, the school secretary, who happened to be, after we moved into the district, she and I became great friends. She was a really wonderful person. So anyway, I didn't know her from Adam. I'd never even been inside the school building before because we didn't have a child old enough to be in elementary school. And I called over and I said, what would you say are the the 3 things that are most important for my daughter to know to be prepared for kindergarten. And I'd already read books. We'd been on websites. She was already in play groups and doing part-time preschool. And she said, I was like, the Missouri minimums are she should be able to count from 1 to, I think, 30. She should be able to recognize numbers 1 through 10. She should be able to read and write her sight words in kindergarten. And so she said, yeah, those are all great. But what we look for, and she said, I've been the school secretary here for 20 years. She retired while our kids were still at elementary school there. She said, what kids have to be ready for school is the ability to sit still for 30 to 45 minutes at a time. So they don't have to be able to sit still all day. They have to be able to sit still for the length of a class period or a lesson, which is 30 to 45 minutes. So they have to be able to sit still and quietly for that amount of time. They should be able to follow a multi-part instruction. So not just pick up your pencil or close your books, but close your books, clear your desks, line up, multi-part instruction. And last but not least, she said they should be well enough, adjusted that they can spend the whole day without you. Which I thought was kind of funny. So I'm like, well, who's got a 5-year-old kid who can't spend the whole day without their mom? But it's a problem. There are kids who show up to kindergarten who've never spent a whole day without their mother. So what does that have to do with what we're seeing in high schools? Well, you can imagine that kids who come to school unprepared to perform those simple tasks as 5-year-olds are probably some of the same children who are going into middle school and they're not reading and writing on grade level. They're not doing math on grade level. They're probably the same kids, some of them, who are now in high school and are disruptive. They're cursing out teachers. They're violent. They're having real problems in school. They're stealing. They're doing some other things, that we don't want to describe and discuss here on this family-centered programming. You see? So there is never going to be a situation where every single kid in every single school district, public and private and parochial and Christian and everything else, where all the kids are on grade level and everyone's perfect. We're dealing with humans here. But to see the kinds of problems that we're talking about on the scale we're discussing, wow. We're talking about an enormous deficit that teachers are having to face. They don't feel like they're being paid enough to deal with these violent kids who are openly defiant and will not obey. Now, I'm in all of the things that we've dealt with as parents, because we're not perfect. We've had our own struggles, and all the things that we've dealt with. I've noticed that anything that we paid a lot of attention to with the kids, we were able to get results on it. But in order to pay attention to those things, there were other things that we had to kind of let go to the side. And so it was about prioritization. And I know for a parent who's struggling, and overwhelmed, that sounds like, you'll just say anything. You're like, oh, you have to prioritize it. Of course I need to prioritize it. What does that mean? Well, it probably means you have to give up something else that you're doing. And you probably are looking around and thinking, what else can I give up? But there has to be something so you can prioritize interfacing with that kid. And for kids who don't have anybody to interface with them, that's where a community comes in. And so, we all mocked Hillary Clinton when she said it takes a village, because she meant your kids are all belong to us. Like what's her name said on TV back then, Melissa Harris Perry, your kids are all belong to us. Remember that? It was like one of the most played radio clips of all time. And we all railed against that. If you're a good parent, you don't want to hear that a village owns your kids. You are pouring yourself into those kids as God has told you to do, and you don't want to hear any of that drama. And I agree with you. You're right. But in circumstances where a family is broken or parents are overwhelmed, that is where community can make a huge difference. And that's where being connected to each other makes a huge difference. I remember learning things from other moms almost by osmosis, just by spending time with them when they were with their kids. And I remember having people ask me, what did you do with, this or with that? Or how did you handle this or that? Not because I was an expert, but because they were just wanting to know how we handled it, because they're handling it themselves. And I would just say, oh, we do this, or we don't do that. We just skip that. There were things that we just chose not to do. So I know one of the things that people want to act as if a teenager is a wild animal like a zebra and it can never be domesticated and there's just nothing you can do and you just have to grit your teeth and close your eyes and ride it out until they're 18. And that is a lie from the pit of hell, and it is not true. You see, I said that both ways. I covered that all the way around. Teenagers can be respectful, contributing members of their households and of the greater society that they inhabit at their high schools and their churches. It's God's call on our lives to make that happen. And when we start doing that, we're going to see a lot of these negative things go away. Absolutely. So right now, it's my pleasure to welcome our guest. It's Dr. Kay Cole James, president of the Heritage Foundation. Dr. James, it's such a pleasure to speak with you.
The pleasure is indeed all mine. Thank you so much for having me.
I was like, Corinne, are you saying she's going to come on the show? And she was like, yes. I'm like, okay, calm down. Calm yourself. So, okay, first off, we want to talk about what's new at Heritage. I was so excited when they said the new president of the Heritage Foundation, Dr. Kay Cole James. I was like, what? So how did
Isn't that something? Yes. You were probably almost as excited as I was.
So tell us about this.
It's been an incredible time. I could not believe that, it's just a culmination of a lifetime, and I still pinch myself.
Okay, like us, we're all pinching ourselves too, because I'm so excited about what you're going to be able to do and all of the different ways that you're going to be able to bring all of your previous work to bear in this environment, because the Heritage Foundation it's a pillar, not just in Washington, D.C., but around the country. It's a reference point, and it's also a means of activism for people on the right to see smaller government, good government, et cetera, et cetera. So what's new there? Now that you're there and you're at the helm, what's new?
Well, I think the main thing is that I want to make sure that the resources that we have, the research, the data, the analysis, even the financial resources that we have available to us at the Heritage Foundation are used to take the message that we have into communities that perhaps have not had that opportunity before. Very often, as conservatives, we like to stay in our small, closed circles and talk to each other. But if we're going to win the day, then we have to get outside of those circles and carry our messages into communities and to constituencies that may not have heard it before.
Oh, you're speaking my language. I keep saying that the Republicans, when we do GOTV and we go out into, put ads out, we completely skip over urban markets who obviously are not predisposed to our messaging, but could certainly use to hear it and get used to us talking about what we believe in. Will we see Heritage do some pushes into the urban markets?
You sure will. There are people that I'm spending time with, talking to. One of my most fun and interesting, and actually one of the more difficult interviews I had today was with Roland Martin, because Roland asked tough questions. But, we've got to be willing to answer those tough questions. He was fair, he was balanced, but he was tough. And that's okay. I'm not afraid of tough. But, so I was delighted to give him a rather lengthy interview today, and that's not a market that the president of the Heritage Foundation would traditionally go to.
Yeah, I agree. But I have to say, I disagree with Roland on pretty much everything, but I do respect his passion for issues facing the Black community. And I do think he's at least has an understanding of where we come from, where you can't say that about many people on the left. So, he has to have kudos for that. Well,
my take on that is it reminds me of when I spoke to a group of Heritage interns, and I said, are you excited about the opportunity to be here so that you can learn everything you need to know to go out and annihilate the opposition? And a few of them said, yes, I am. I said, oh, my word, you're in the wrong program. That's not why you're here. The reason you're here is to learn how to go out and win the opposition. So, whether I'm on Roland Martin's show or yours or anyone else's, I think the message is we want to convince you that with research and data and with common sense and with logic, that what we believe is right. I don't want to hurt or annihilate my opposition. I want to win them over.
It's a different way of thinking and going about it. And we need it. I mean, all of us could serve to hear that message and maybe hear it on a little loop right before we go to bed so we can calm down, just settle down a little bit. So what I want to do now is we have a quick commercial break. And then when we come back, I want to talk about your piece on the Hill, questions about school safety. I'm dying to hear your take on this. I think the listeners need to hear it. America needs to know what you think about this issue. So we're going to hold on for a quick break, and we'll be back with more from Dr. Kay Cole James, president of the Heritage Foundation. You guys, I got the goosebumps because I'm talking to Dr. James. We'll be right back with more.
What does it take to live an uncommon life? Here's former Super Bowl winning coach Tony Dungy with today's uncommon moment.
At the start of the 2009 NFL season, I spoke to the Minnesota Vikings at their chapel service, and I told the story of the prodigal son. Now, most of the time when we hear this story, we highlight the younger son who makes a mess of his life before returning home. But in my experience, the older brother in the story isn't talked about very much. He displays a "that's not fair" attitude when his father welcomes his younger brother back. What about the leadership of the older brother? I suggested to the Vikings that no one was in a better position to mentor than the older brother. I wonder what would have happened had he really mentored his younger brother. What about you? Is there someone in your life that needs you to help them, to mentor them?
Tony Dungy. Discover more at CoachDungy.com. That's CoachDungy.com.
Listen to Stacy on the Right with Stacy Washington on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp.
I mean, did you hear that?
Pointed.
Remember that you're not only a Christian on Sunday.
And insightful.
Deception and lies have been accepted as the norm from the Democrats.
But most of all, she's on the right.
That scripture from the Bible, it says the heart of the fool inclines to the left. Just kept popping into my mind.
Stacy on the Right. Now heard weekday afternoons from 2 to 4 Central on Urban Family Talk. Chris Brooks.
We cannot underestimate the responsibility of evangelism. That is why shows like this, Equipped, which is committed to equipping you every day to live, share, and defend your faith, are extremely important, because anyone who does not confess Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior is outside of God's saving grace.
Equipped. Weekdays at noon Central on Urban Family Talk.
This week during our family worship time together, when we turned to the scripture, I was sharing with my family, and we were discussing the scripture that says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed." And I was explaining the whole caterpillar to cocoon to butterfly process. My son said, he's 6 years old, Daddy, I get it. We're like the caterpillars. God provides the cocoon, and God's desire all along is, even though we're in caterpillar form, is for us to become butterflies. And then look what he said. But you know when we get into trouble, Daddy? When we try to move from caterpillar to butterfly and we skip over God. And when you try to skip over God, you think you have your wings, but you fall flat.
Tune in to the Hamilton Corner, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk.
And I had to tell you, I had to fight back tears in the moment, because I'm saying, oh Lord, he's getting this.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right.
All right, welcome back to the show, everybody. We have been speaking with Dr. Kay Cole James, president of the Heritage Foundation, and right now we're going to delve into that topic that we have been covering quite a bit on the show, but I am so interested in her perspective. Dr. James, thank you so much for holding on and for coming on the show today.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's talk about this. The questions about school safety. I I think that's where our primary focus should be, is on hardening the school buildings and, getting training for teachers and anyone who wants to be armed, allowing that, especially for people who are already concealed carry certified. Where do you stand on this?
Well, I was in Florida, 20 miles from the shooting on the day that it occurred, and so I think I got more than even most of America did in terms of the emotional impact of that. And as a mother and a grandmother, I certainly, I just lie awake at night and I think about what our children have to face. And so, as a conservative, and as a Christian, I want more than anything safe environments for our kids to go to school. When the young people of Florida stepped up to the plate and decided that they wanted to take this issue on and become engaged, I was so encouraged by that because I think young people should do that. Mm. But where I became discouraged is when I realized that, of course, for our democracy to work, we need people who are both engaged and informed. And I saw that the young people were engaged, but they were, woefully misinformed on so many of the issues surrounding school safety. As an example, if your real desire is to make schools safer, then you have to deal with the fact that the majority of young people who lose their lives in schools are not as a result of gun violence. It's as a result of knives and fights and other things. And so the violence that plagues our schools, guns are a part of it, but not the total piece. I think it's also important to understand, and we don't want to deal with this stuff because it's so hard. My goodness, do you understand the role that mental health plays in almost every one of these shootings? These young people have felt disenfranchised. They felt bullied. They felt disconnected and disrespected. And they don't know how to deal with that. And they see that the barrel of a gun may provide them some measure of equality, I suppose. Then you look at when you go back and you study the shooters, and you recognize those who are in the school and those that happen on the streets of our urban areas that come from broken homes, broken families, and no fathers there. What is the impact of that? And then I think it's important for us to take a look at what's coming out of Hollywood, what is constantly embedded in their little souls and in their spirits. And when you look at the gaming community and you see the violent video games that are used, the problem is way more complex than a lot of people are willing to engage in. They see it purely as a gun issue, and I simply don't. It's a much deeper, broader issue than just simply guns.
And you encapsulated that so perfectly. I hope if people are listening, if you just tuned in, I'm speaking with Dr. Kay Cole James, president of the Heritage Foundation, and she has just perfectly elucidated how complex this issue is and how much we can't just get caught up in an emotional discussion, just focusing in on one aspect of what happened, which is the tool that was used, the firearm. You mentioned, Dr. James, this it's a recurring theme with these shootings. It's a kid or two kids who've been bullied, and the adults in the space, the teachers, administrators, etc., they ignored what was happening to the student. And so the student begins to internalize, and they begin to kind of go down a really, really dark path. And a lot of times video games are involved. And sometimes it's mental illness. Sometimes it's just a kid who's been bullied to the point of now they're going to strike back and take revenge. Why can't we just discuss that? Why can't teachers say, you're out of this classroom, you're bullying this student and I won't put up with it? Why is that so hard for teachers to deal with?
You know, the problem is so severe that I think it's time that we demand that those who are in decision-making roles do look at the full range of issues surrounding what's going on in our schools. I can't, for the sake of my grandchildren, whom I love beyond all measure, want to accept a bumper sticker that says ban guns and think that the problem is solved. It isn't. It isn't.
It's
and
not.
one of the things that we know more than anything is that the bad guys will always have guns.
Not only that, they'll always have the biggest, most, capable guns. They don't go for the small, rinky-dink little pea shooters. They go for the most, the guns that do the most mayhem, which means private firearms owners like myself, like so many people who are Americans, regardless of political affiliation, they deserve to have access to the same firearms for their own protection. Where do you come down on the arming of teachers who would want to, not mandatory, but anyone who would want to get the training and become, someone who carries a firearm at school? Are you in favor of that, opposed, or whatever?
Absolutely. I want my kids protected. And if a teacher goes through the requisite background checks, goes through training, goes through psychological evaluation, and it is determined that their skill level is adequate, then I want that person trained and ready to defend and protect. One of the things that we know about school shootings and violence in general is that most of it happens within the first few minutes before we can count on those wonderful first responders to get there to protect us. And so we have to be in a position to be able to protect ourselves. And I want trained individuals who are prepared to protect our kids to be in those schools. When I walk into an airport to get on an airplane or into a train station even, or into any government building in Washington, D.C., there are people there who are armed with hardened facilities, which means you have to go through metal detectors and checks in order to go in and enter those buildings. But our schools don't have that. And quite frankly, I think our kids are far more valuable and important, or just as valuable and important as anyone in this city.
I agree. I'm really surprised by the pushback from Hollywood elites who they actually do their gun control marches surrounded by armed security, but they don't want that same thing for regular kids in public schools across the country. I want to hear you weigh in, Dr. James, on the state of the family. And I know one of my favorite resources is the white papers that are produced by the Heritage Foundation. And you have a number of columnists who write for the Daily Signal who comment on this topic. But I'm specifically looking for where you see us going with public policy to support better family outcomes, because I believe a lot of these school shooters come from broken homes, which contributes to the fact that they're unsupervised and they can kill.
Oh, absolutely. And I have been involved in the pro-family movement for years and years and years, for decades. And even decades ago, I said the first family value is to value family. It is amazing to me that we have produced a culture where young people don't even see the value in forming families anymore. It used to be a problem in our country about families breaking up. And now we have a problem that families aren't even forming anymore because we don't value those relationships. We don't understand the emotional and psychological and health benefits of having a mom and a dad in a home raising kids. And we don't understand, I think, as a country and as a community, the implications of what it looks like when those family units break down and those resources are no longer there. So I think the first family value is to value family. In working with college kids, I was talking to a young woman one time and was absolutely shocked when she said, I have no intention of ever getting married. I'll just have, guys who can come and go in my life, and I'm fine with that, because when a man comes in your life and stays, he usually brings chaos. And I said, sweetie, I am so sorry that that's been your experience. But I'd like for you to meet my husband. We've been married for over 45 years. And he didn't bring chaos with him, but you just haven't seen that. You haven't experienced that. You don't know the joy that comes from a two-parent family and what it means to raise your kids that way. So it's awfully difficult now because many of our young people don't see it, don't experience it, and don't understand the value of marriage and family.
Well, I think you know, you've been in this fight long enough to know that whatever the pendulum can swing in either direction. And so we've seen, you know, a lot of degradation over the past few decades. And my hope and prayer is that we'll be able to move that pendulum back in the other direction with God and hard work and the efforts of, you know, organizations like yours, the Heritage Foundation, and places like the, you know, Urban Family Talk and American Family Radio and others who are out there doing this hard work. I'm going to put you on the spot because I have to. I can't let you off without saying the next time I'm in DC, I'm going to be reaching out so I can hopefully meet you in person and sit and talk about how we can work together, the Heritage Foundation and Urban Family Talk, to do whatever you think we might be able to do.
I'm going to put you on the spot and say I'm going to hold you to it.
Oh, I'll be there. I love stopping by the Heritage Foundation when I'm in DC.
Excellent.
Perfect. And then, of course, we'd love to have you back on to talk more in the future, and I'll work with Corinne on getting that to happen. And other hosts, I'm sure, will be reaching out to you as well. We love what you're doing there.
Absolutely, and I'm looking forward to it.
I'm so
Thanks
glad
so much,
you're there.
and have a great one.
Thank you so much. Dr. Kay Cole James, president of the Heritage Foundation. And that was a fantastic interview that I encourage you to share. Go onto the YouTube. You know, the cool thing about YouTube is you can clip a YouTube video and you can share just that interview, or you can share the whole show. Thank you for listening into the show today. So we just have a couple of minutes left, and I want to let you guys listen to this Democrat talking about how fellow Democrats are joking about how their constituents don't give a hoot about Russia and the Russia investigation. And I believe this portends for the 2018 midterm elections. I'm telling you that it does. I know 538 Blog is the only pollster out there who's saying that the Democrats do not have a lock on taking the House of Representatives in the fall. Everyone else is saying it's theirs for the taking. Maxine Waters is already talking about impeachment. I don't believe it's going to happen, but we have to get out and vote. So listen to this. It's Himes talking about fellow Democrats joking about how her constituents don't care anything about Russia. It's number 5.
Congressman, one thing I don't get is if Russia is such a serious issue, why aren't Democrats running more on it ahead of the midterm elections?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, there's a piece of this that we're not talking enough about. It's not just the money that's not spent. It's not the work to make sort of a national project to protect our elections. It's we're not making it clear to the Russians that they can't do this again. We're the most powerful country in the world. They're not. We carry a big stick. But to the politics, to your question, here's the thing. My good friend Sherry Bustos, who represents a very tough district in Illinois,
great.
We have sort of a running joke going in the mornings, which is, you know, she's got a district very different than mine. I represent Fairfield County, Connecticut. She's in the heartland. She's in a district that we need to figure out how to win again. Every Monday morning when I see Sherry, we come up and there's a little bit of laughter, and she says, you know what, my constituents still aren't asking me about Russia. And the point there is that if the Democratic Party doesn't get focused, and I'm not sure we're doing this well, if we don't get focused on kitchen table issues, on the anxiety of American families, we're going to pay a cost.
But if you can make the case here in Washington, why can't you make the case in her district?
Well, I think that's the question that answers itself. A case that is made here inside the Beltway rarely, I think, has a lot of resonance to middle-class families sitting around in small towns in Ohio and Michigan.
And also Fairfield County.
Yes, that's my laugh of satisfaction. I think one of the things that is most important about that little piece of audio there is that this person, Himes, understands that what flies in Washington doesn't necessarily fly out in the heartland, but it's not about one Democrat getting that. It's about a lot of different elected officials getting that and changing their tone and their rhetoric. And I just don't see that happening. And so in the absence of that, I would like for the Republicans to focus on talking about the things that matter, namely, and this isn't to gloat, but it's to point out that great things are happening around the country because of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Wonderful outcomes are being had by business owners and sole proprietors and even employees who are seeing the benefits that their employers are passing on to them in the form of bonuses, lower health care premiums, and higher minimum wage for minimum wage employees and bigger paychecks overall for everyone who now has to pay less in tax. And then moving on to some of the other issues that have to be addressed. The Republicans have an agenda. One of the agenda items is defunding Planned Parenthood. I'd like to see us get to that. I think we can do it. I know we can do it because we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. Not because the Republicans are a Christian party, but because it's the people. What do we believe? Think about that a little bit and know that God has so much more for us than whatever it is we've laid out for ourselves. That's the greatest thing. That and salvation. All right. We'll be back tomorrow with more Stacy on the Right. Thanks for being here today. God bless.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not